Peyton, man. Nice to see you again. And today's topic is about asymmetries in life and work and about asymmetric bets. It's a broad topic, a general topic, but it's a valuable idea to ponder upon. What is your take on asymmetries in life and asymmetric bets? What do you think about it?
Yeah, good to be back. I'm glad to be talking about this. It's a really useful topic that I think I was first introduced to by Nassim Taleb, and it would have been the Incerto, but probably Anti-Fragile or Skin in the Game, one of those two books. And the idea is there's a lot of things you can do. He was really talking about money and finance because he was a trader. There's a lot of things you can do with money and finance, but also in broader life where you're staking 1 times your investment, but you stand to gain 1,000 times your investment. So that's what the asymmetry is. The asymmetry between what you stand to gain on one hand versus what you have at stake or what you stand to lose on the other hand. And this framework is important because a lot of things in life and in money do work like this, where you can write a check for a startup or some kind of a seed investment and gain 10,000x your investment, but you can only lose 1x your investment. Or you can go and talk to a stranger and you can gain a 10-year friendship that enriches your life in certain ways, but you can lose 2 minutes of your time and a little bit of energy going up and approaching somebody. Or you can see a new habit potentially and try to start it, and you can gain years of energy, but you could lose, if it doesn't work out, 30 days of running the experiment. And so it's useful to be attuned to this concept that a lot of things are like this, not just in money and investment, but actually also how we live our lives, things that can enrich our experience on Earth, and understand that even if something potentially has less than a 50% chance of working, it may really, really, really be worth taking that bet if it's a highly asymmetric bet. And being attuned to, is this an asymmetric bet or not, as we're trying to assess whether or not we should take something on, is a fairly useful place to start, or at least something that we should probably consider in a lot of our big and small decisions in terms of how we're allocating our time, energy, and resources.
Great take, man. Thanks for the insights. And now, as you talked about the friendship part, I strongly remembered our meeting up the first time. It was in a park in Amsterdam, where you came there and asked, "Hey, man, what you doing? How's your day?" Something like that. From this resulting is a 10-year-long friendship. Such a great friendship. That was the asymmetric bet that really paid off, at least for me. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity to make this great podcast with you, to share these ideas and concepts and ponder about them. And I have a background as an engineer, and that's why I tend to see things in a systematic manner, like the systemic way. If you have a system which can be interconnected parts which interact with each other, you can describe characteristics of that system. You have an input to the system, you also have an output from the system. And on asymmetries, they tend to come when the output is highly disconnected from the input of the system. You put in like a short amount of time, you put in like limited resources, you put in some money, and what happens in the system you do not quite know, but you have an experiment, and what can come out is maybe nothing, then it's lost what you put in. But what could come out as well is like this disconnected output of 10x the thing you put in, or 100x, or an unlimited amount of the things you put in. If you see the systematic characteristics of the thing you are interacting with as a nonlinear system, which provides the ability to have this leverage, which you can utilize for yourself in a systematic manner as well, like putting in the time to exercise regularly gives your body the ability to adapt its systems inside itself in a healthy manner, like the information flow, the nutritional flow, the exchange of parts of your cells and so on, and the cleaning up of your body. Even when you put in some time, then you become more healthy, which provides the benefits in the long run. If you invest like in an insurance, which is not really investing, but capping the possible downsides which may come when a storm destroys your house, but you paid a monthly fee to a storm insurance, that will cap your downside risks in an important manner, which does not need to happen, but in a possible, in like every possible world, it may happen. And this risk of this event happening in one of all the possible worlds is now capped, at least some of the downsides of it. And as well with getting to know people. Going to a party gives you a chance to meet some life-changing personalities, which will result in year-long friendships and decades-long friendships.
Yeah, it's crazy too that the other side of this can be capping the downside. And the reason that this can be so important in terms of understanding what is at stake in a bet, in something that we're putting at risk, is this concept of ergodicity. That's, like many things in statistics, not really intuitive to me, not really intuitive for a lot of people. Like, I wouldn't have understood this unless I had learned about it and read about it and kind of done the math. But if you think about bet sizing in general, because this is honestly an important component of utilizing asymmetric bets in your life, is you must understand what you're putting at stake and how to make the math work in your favor. So if you have, let's say, a bet that has a 10% chance of going 100x, but a 90% chance of going to zero, right? So in 1 out of 10 cases, it multiplies by 100. In 9 out of 10 cases, it goes down to zero. So all things being equal, on average, that's going to multiply by 10, right? But if you put 100% of what you have into this thing, you're probably getting reset to zero. It's kind of dumb to do, to put everything at stake on something that's probably going to completely wipe you out. But if you have $100 and you take maybe 10 of these bets, and you put only $5 each into these bets, then 1 out of 10 works out. It multiplies up to $500. The other 5 don't work out, and they all go to zero. Then by sizing your bets right, spreading this out enough, taking enough bets, and ideally you take much more than 10 so that over time the law of averages kind of works out in your favor, and you can smooth this out to the extent that you can. By doing that, you can get a great overall outcome, even though the vast majority of these things are going to go all the way down to zero. The reason why ergodicity is important, kind of stepping back again, is if you have $100 to start and you place, let's say, half your chips on a bet like this that goes to zero because you have big eyeballs and you're kind of thirsty for a story in your head about what this could be for you. In other words, like there's this emotion of greed that all of us can succumb to at times in investing. If that wipes you all the way down to half of your wealth because you overbet on this, now you lost 50%. It takes more than a 50% gain to get back to where you're at because of how multiplication works. So like, start at $100, you lose 50%. Now you have to gain 100% to get back to zero. So it's when you go far back, and then if you say, okay, you start at $100, you bet 90%, now you're down to 10%. In order to get back to $100, you have to gain 1,000% on the $10 that remains just to get back to where you started. And so if you let yourself go too far down, because of ergodicity and how the multiplication of this works, it's a lot harder to dig yourself out of that hole. And so an important component of a strategy of resource allocation involving taking asymmetric bets, where by their very nature, the outcome of these things is probably going to be majority outside of your control. They're bets. You see that this could turn out to something big. There's a very good chance that this will become nothing. If you want to take advantage of this, which is generally, it can be very fruitful, or it can apply, especially if you understand the probabilities and the outcomes and blah, 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 you know that a lot of these are going to go to zero. You must make your bets with an appropriate size so you don't reset yourself too far, that you don't have enough to allocate to really get yourself back up. And so that's why Nassim Taleb does what he calls the barbell strategy, or Mark Smith-Sagel, who's really more in the arena still, uses a barbell strategy, where they lose small, tiny little slices, protect the vast majority of what they have left. Meanwhile, they're making these bets that, if they're right, they pay off tremendously. And they make lots and lots and lots of little bets. So they protect the principal, or the majority of what's at stake. But they're giving themselves a lot of exposure to opportunities for large returns along the way. And you can do this, like you say, with insurance and other ways of capping the downside besides just not investing. But they do this in a way that you protect what you have. You take a lot of these little bets. Some of the little bets pay off in a very big asymmetric way, and you grow over time. The alternative to this, or another type of bet that you can make, is a non-asymmetric bet where your downside is not capped. And so this is just an important thing to understand. It's not that all bets that aren't asymmetric, where you have unlimited downside, are necessarily the wrong thing to do, but you better have some control over the situation if your downside's not capped, and you better understand what you're getting into, because as soon as your downside is not capped, so for example, when I went and bought a window company, my downside was really not capped. I had a lot more at stake than the liquidation value of the company, and it was a very high percentage of my net worth at the time. So if it didn't go well, I was going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing cash from everywhere else out into this until I ran out. And so I had to know that, and you can only know this to an extent, but I had to have a good comfort that I could figure out how to make this work. And I knew going into it that if something went wrong, I had no chance but to fix it. I had no chance but to make it work. It wasn't a capped downside bet. It had a high upside, but my downside was actually really, really high because I was signing up for so much stuff, and there was a lot of ongoing expenses and committed expenses and debt and etc. So that was not an asymmetric bet. And so when you're making these different types of bets, they can both be useful and a part of your overall strategy. But when you're making an asymmetric bet, your downside is capped. You put 1 times your investment. You're not signing your name on the line that if things go wrong, you're going to keep pushing more and more of your stuff down into this. Your downside's capped. But by their very nature, normally it's something that you see there's an opportunity, but you can't ensure the outcome. You can't control the outcome. Normally, that's how these work. Sometimes it can be different. You can have an informational advantage or whatever. But most of the time, you're playing with probabilities and rolling dice, and you need to make sure that you're doing this in a way that, in a random walk, if things happen in 500 different scenarios and different orders and different timings with the roll of the dice, that the math is going to work to where you still win. Whereas if you take a non-asymmetric bet, or a bet where you have high downside and high upside, then you better be looking at your degree of control. And you can make both of these types of bets, both these types of allocations, all these investment decisions together, and they can kind of mutually support each other in certain cases. But they have totally different flavors, and there's different things that are very important that you better be sure of in both cases. And a lot of times it does have to do with ergodicity and not getting reset too far back that it takes 10 times more to get yourself out of the hole that you just dug yourself because you over allocated into something that was a loss.
Great take on ergodicity and asymmetry and your decisions and your story about how to allocate resources in a proper proportion, which leads to the outcome which is most favorable, is to be in a position to have the potential to gain much, but avoid total ruin. So this is the Most important thing is avoid being ruined, avoid total reset, avoid death. So there's this Kelly criterion, I think, which states, yeah, if you size a bet, then the easiest rule of thumb is like 60-40. 60% of your net worth should be like cash assets or whatever, and 40% may be taken to invest in other manners. And 40% of that, and you can divide this multifractally down. So this is not investment advice, but this is a criterion which can be used to bet sizing in a very easy manner, which takes into account avoiding the total ruin and betting everything on one horse. So similarly as stated, you can compare the tiny thing that is too much to a waterfall. If you step towards a waterfall, and you better not take the very last step, because then you fall down the waterfall and it is much, much more difficult to get to the place where you started once again. Like losing 75% of your money, of the invested money, makes it necessary for you to regain 300% of what is left to be at the exact same spot again. I think it's what Spitznagel called "wir nulli falls," that they're nulli falls. And the funny thing about is, every time I tend to ponder upon Nassim Taleb's ideas. When I read Mark Spitznagel, he really laid it out clearly in a way that I could really understand and grasp. Whereas Taleb throws them at you like a erudite, which knows what he's talking about, but White is not able to to make it as clear as like Mark Spitznagel does. Yes.
And the interesting part of it too is
therefore the most important principle is to avoid total loss and avoid the ruin.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me as well because I took a degree in finance. Like I took a ton of finance courses in terms of corporate finance, resource allocation, building portfolios, understanding returns, all this stuff. And they never taught us about ergodicity. It's one of the largest blind spots in that entire field. And it's a concept that a lot of these hedge fund managers that read and understand Taleb do actually have a leg up because it's so important to understand the very nature of the game we're playing. The reason why ergodicity is so important and it's such a big blind spot is the nature of time and the fact that as an investor, as an allocator of resources, whether it's financial resources or it's personal, just time and energy resources, the principles do apply there. But it can be clearer to see with financial resources. You are not 100 people making a bet at one time and having them average out. This is the logic of how most financial returns are calculated, and how most even finance classes, finance curriculum, and common knowledge within the banking industry even can kind of steer people toward thinking as if we are in one point in time and it's static and everything averages out, and that average out is just multiplied over time kind of in a vacuum. Or not even multiplied over time in terms of things going up and down, but the average itself is multiplied over time. The reality is, I am not 100 people doing 100 different things at once, playing 100 different scenarios at once. I am one individual with one pool of resources. And so what is important to me is not a snapshot of what 100 different versions of this bet happen at one given point in time. In other words, if you have a bet that goes plus 100% and minus 100%, so like one, let's say, at the same time, I can do this, and there's a 50-50 chance of doubling as going to zero. Then on paper, if we're averaging out at one given point in time, which is the logic of finance classes, for example, then it looks like this is a break-even decision. It's either going to double or it's going to go to zero. On average, I'm going to have the same thing that I started with. But if I'm actually understanding the logic by which investments play out over time, these things happen in phases and they multiply each other. So if I go and double this and I run these just back to back, the first one I double, so I go from $100 to $200. The second one I go to zero. Then overall, I've gone from $100 to zero. And that happens in whichever way these dice roll. If I go to zero first and then I double that, I'm going to end up with zero. Whereas that's not captured by taking a hypothetical average of 100 different people making an investment at one point in time. The reality is we allocate our resources as individuals over the course of time. And that is why it's so important to understand ergodicity if we actually want to maximize our outcomes, once again, financial or personal. And if that is the case, we need to understand how multiplication works when it's sequential. And there's a lot of different things multiplied by each other. And it turns out that the losses are really, really hard to recover from if they're too big. And so that's kind of why, that's, in my opinion, the biggest blind spot in finance. Like, I cannot believe that this was not like front and center in Finance 301, something like that. But this is so essential to understand if we're going to actually grow and compound wealth in the long run. And getting back to the personal side of things, go ahead. Go ahead.
What I wanted to emphasize is that our gut feeling is really connected to this wisdom of not allocating everything you have into one place, and therefore you have a bad feeling when you think about playing Russian roulette. But the expected value, if a billionaire offers you like 10 million, is like 1/6 of 10 million. This is the expected value for the people who calculate statistically the expected value. But they assume that it is an ergodic system, which they calculated the value for, which it is not. Because you cannot enjoy 1/6 of 10 million if you are dead. You could enjoy it if you control the game, but the thing is, better not play these games which you have no control over. Because these are not ergodic, which means that all the parallel plays will not have the same averaged outcome as all the time sequential plays. So you end up dead if you pull all the triggers. For sure you will end up dead, so that you cannot enjoy these rewards that they potentially bring, because the primary assumption was wrong. And many things in economic theory have this wrong assumption of ergodic systems, so that our gut feeling actually is a much more reliable indicator of whether to take part in certain games or not. And this makes you more able to not participate in any bullshit which gets offered to you in a manner which would convince economists, for example, to take part in such plays and games.
Yeah, and it's one last thing about ergodicity and going to zero and over allocating on an individual bet is human emotion and greed is the greatest temptation into this. Like, I can tell you that when I've over allocated into something and taken a big loss financially, it's because I had a story in my mind of how this was going to pay off, and I really had some desire for a particular outcome and a vision for a particular outcome that I became attached to, and it caused me to become irrationally exuberant about some particular opportunity and over allocated to it in a way that did push me back further than actually would have been optimal if I was right sizing my bets. And getting onto the personal side of things, just as a note that I still am looking for more and more ways to integrate this into our life, but many of the things that we try in life are in themselves asymmetric bets. So if I go to a new rock climbing gym and I spend a Wednesday evening there, I'm allocating 3 hours to it. But perhaps it's something that I love and I go for months and I build friendships and I have a community and I develop this skill and I have these great memories and blah, blah, blah. I have so much more to gain than I have to lose from that experiment, that bet of my time and energy. Same with talking to strangers, going on first dates, trying a new skill or a new hobby that we think might interest us. There's there's a um, there's an there's a way in which peeking behind the curtains of various personal opportunities, various things that we think we may enjoy, various people that we think we may enjoy connecting with, even putting ourselves out there to somebody that we meet at a meetup and asking if they want to go on a hike. There's very, very little cost of putting ourselves out there, attempting to pursue new opportunities for personal growth or enjoyment than we have to gain from what these things could lead into. And we must know that most of these things won't amount to anything. Most people that we talk to, we're not going to particularly connect with in a unique way that's going to enrich our lives in the long run. But the cost is so low of opening up one of these doors and seeing, oh, will I enjoy this habit? Will I enjoy speaking to this person? Will I enjoy going on this hike or trying this new thing or going to this new restaurant or going on this first date or the list goes on and on and on. There's many, 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 many things in our life that we can, at a very low cost, and a cost that we can be intentional about and mitigate because we kind of aren't attached to overdoing it or sticking with something that we see doesn't work. We can identify, okay, it actually would only cost me 2 hours and some energy to see if this is worthwhile to me. And I can see that if it is, if I really do connect with it in a way that I think is possible, that this could change my life fairly significantly for the better over the course of a few years. And so that's one area that I'm looking to, I guess, bring more into my mind as I see new things in my life. And there is this balance of you do have to say no and protect the white space and not pursue things that are unintelligent bets. And not all asymmetric bets are created equal. Some of these things are great opportunities. Some of them don't have that high of payoff, even if they are what we hope they are. But regardless, understanding how this can play out in our lives, understanding the opportunity of us personally to enrich who we are, to grow, to expand our horizons, to encounter new people, to network and to expand the humans in our sphere. There's so many opportunities where we have way, 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 way more to gain than we have to lose from just finding out or expending the time and energy to find out what is behind this opportunity. What is this for me? What could this be for my life? And so that's something that I will definitely try to keep my eyes a little more open and think through this lens, because I do believe that a lot of these things in our life have 100 times more to offer us than they cost to find out if they will really be that for us.
Yeah, that's true. It makes me think of the saying of which Derek Sivers brought to me, and I was inspired today to buy his book, Hell Yeah or No. And if it's not a hell yes, whatever you choose to take or to pursue, then he thinks that it should be a no because it leaves the room and space in your life open for the things that really fit into your life. If it's not a yes, a hell yes, then it's a no, because then you have the room to have these asymmetric beneficial coincidences flooding into your life, and you can actually take them because you have the hands free and you have the space for them to be invited into your life. And that makes me think also about one last asymmetry that I can think about, which correlates to our real life, is trust. Trust gets built in the speed a coconut tree grows, but also trust falls the speed in which a coconut falls. So this is the essence. Don't fuck it up. So whenever anybody comes and say, "Hey, how often times should I lie to my spouse when the possibility of her detecting my lie is like 10%?" I say, never.
Yeah.
Because of this asymmetry, you cannot rebuild the trust that once was lost. The same goes with robbing banks.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and that is a great call out as a closer. Is there are many things in life that we have much more to lose than we have to gain, and those are suckers games. There's many things that can end way worse than we could possibly hope to gain from them. Lying to people is one. Screwing people over is another. Making short-term decisions that can erode your long-term goals is one. Things that are bad for our health can be another. Things that are where we're flirting with addiction can be another. Like for example, when I have a surgery, I do not take opiates because I know that the downside of that is so much higher than the upside of a little bit of pain reduction for a couple of weeks. Same with I don't go into casinos and gamble. I know that I can lose so much more than I can gain in a couple of dopamine rushes from that. Not that it's wrong for anybody to do that or whatever. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but for me personally, these are certain things where I've identified like, okay, the asymmetry goes in the wrong direction. And so I do not want to take an asymmetric bet where I have way more to lose than I have to gain. So anyways, man, I appreciate you talking about these things with me. These are useful mental models that I'm going to be paying a little bit more attention to this week and looking for personal and financial asymmetric bets, how those flow in different ways, and also being intentional about opening these potential doors for myself and looking for ways that I would really enjoy an outsized gain, and maybe I should take a few of these experiments with a little bit of time and energy. So, anyways, appreciate you very much. Thank you as always. It's been a pleasure, man.
Appreciate you too, brother. It's been
Have
a
a good one.
pleasure, man. Thank you so much. Have a
Yes.
good one.
Bye bye.